today we're going to talk about comparative market analysis. And comparative market analysis, I always say, and I'll say it again and again, it's more of an art than it is a science. Why? Well, it's a thing that sets us apart from estimates, which, by the way, guys, should never be considered whatsoever, given any credibility in evaluating the monetary value of a property, which is what a comparative market analysis is all about, is evaluating the price, right? A reasonable price range for a property based upon its condition and its specs, which can sometimes be very easy, sometimes be very difficult. And I'm going to teach you a couple of different methods that we can employ depending upon what information is available in order to analyze data and come to a conclusion about a recommended pricing. Okay, so can anyone share with us ideas as to why a Zillow estimate or any kind of automated online evaluation model, what the flaws are, why those dollar amounts might not be accurate?
The person may not know the neighborhood.
It's not a person.
I mean,
Yeah,
it's automated.
it's automated.
Oh.
Yeah, so how do these websites come up with this dollar amount? Something called an algorithm. I'm not going to pretend like I necessarily understand what a computerized or whatever algorithm is, other than, right, it's a series of zeros and ones like all computer programming that is executed in order to create a series of events and actions that somehow populate this automated value. Okay. Oh, Siri thought I was talking to her because I said series. It's an algorithm. So what is an algorithm? What can it analyze? Does an algorithm have eyes? Do they have the ability to assess the condition of a property?
No.
Absolutely not. So what kind of criteria can the algorithm use to come up with an estimated value for a property?
Whatever someone types in.
It's definitely going to be based on numbers, on specs. So those numbers and specs, I think that they come from property records, but they can probably, yes, to your point, also be skewed by maybe an owner going into a dashboard on Zillow and overriding criteria that's in there. Although I think that's less common. So what they're doing is they're looking at recent sales in the area, and they're looking at square footage, bedroom, bathroom count, lot size, year built. And these items, these numbers, they can be inaccurate, right? Property records is oftentimes inaccurate, even though maybe things were done for permit. They don't indicate if a property is located next to the freeway or next to new construction, or maybe the only multifamily building on a block, which could reduce its desirability, therefore influence its property value down in a downward way, influence the property's value in a downward fashion, right? They don't know if it's across the street from a school that causes traffic jams twice a day. They don't see things like that. But most importantly, one of the very flawed criteria that's in there is a property year built does not get modified unless the entire property is torn down to the ground. Okay, and what this means is that something can be torn down to one wall, completely be rebuilt, and really have the value of almost new construction, right? Pretty much new construction at that point. Yet the year built is still going to show that original year built, and so that's going to throw the algorithm way off. So let's say I have two homes that are exactly the same specs next to each other. One is completely original condition. They're both built in the 50s, okay? One's completely original condition. The other one has been completely remodeled, tore down to that one wall. In Zillow's eyes, that property is going to be worth the same dollar amount, both of those properties, right? And that's where you get major discrepancies and issues. So online evaluation models should be ignored entirely. And now you know why, and you can explain this to your clients when they're like, well, Zillow says my house is worth 2 million. You're telling me it's worth 1.2. What are you talking about? right? You can explain and then you can show them your sales comps using the CMA that you've created to explain to them and show them why their property is, in your professional opinion, worth a certain dollar amount versus what Zillow says. There are also articles all over online. My favorite one is like some C-level Zillow exec's home was for sale. Zillow said it was worth, a couple $1 million. I don't even think it sold for half of it. I can't remember the specifics of it, but I send that article out to my clients to kind of illustrate that Zillow can be really wildly inaccurate. It's not always, but don't give it any credibility. A CMA has a human being who's able to assess property condition and look at photos, which very heavily influence what the value of the property actually is. All right. Also, let's talk about some other criteria for a CMA. So I use different criteria for when I'm advising sellers, when I'm in a listing presentation on pricing versus what I'm advising buyers. There's a reason for this. So a property comp, a sales comp, is not a sales comp unless it is a sold house. Why? Well, listing price is not indicative of what price a property will close at, right? Okay, so all of the listings that are active, under contract, or pending will very likely become the most relevant sales comps for a listing where I'm advising the seller in pricing. So is this information relevant? Well, it should not be in my CMA, only closed sales should be. I create a CMA and I create what's called a secondary CMA. You can call it whatever you want for listings. And the reason for this is because I'm going to print out the MLS listings on stuff that is for sale. 100% your potential seller clients are going to bring these listings up, okay? And they're going to say, hey, well, you're telling me my house is worth 1.5, but my neighbor's is listed for 2, and it's exactly the same. And I'll have to explain to them that listing price is not indicative of what a closed sales price will be, and that no appraiser, buyer, or agent is going to look at an actively listed property as a valid sales comp, because we can list your property for $5 million or $5. Does that mean that's what it's worth? Absolutely not, right? However, I will have called all of the listing agents on the properties that are currently active, pending, or sold that might become sales comps for my potential clients listing. And I will have written down detailed notes. I will have done my best to fish information out of them, explain to them, these agents, why I'd like this information, and see if they'll give me information as to what price they are under contract, even if that's just a range. And I have to be, pretty charming to get this information a lot of the time. And usually I offer this listing agent the opportunity to come into my soon-to-be new listing before it goes to market in exchange for this information. And I let them know that this is because I have an upcoming listing in the area that I think will be affected by the sales price. I don't give them the address because I don't want them contacting these sellers, right? And potentially taking the listing from me. A lot of times I will be a complete liar and I will tell them, oh, it's one of my family members or a dear friend. That way they don't go around trying to find out what house it is. And that I really need some help because the market's changing very drastically as we move forward, and I need help trying to get my clients to accept current market conditions. Whether or not that's true, I've just found it the easiest way to get cooperation. Obviously, I'm complimenting them, their photos, their listing, all of that, and letting them know that, especially if their property is active, that any buyers that come into my open houses, I'll tell about their property if my property doesn't work for them, that kind of thing. So that's very important. Now, for a buyer, I am only using closed sales. No listing agent has any reason or motivation to give me any information when I'm working with a buyer client. However, that doesn't mean they won't, right? So if I'm having a really tough time, like let's say I am advising a buyer where to bring an offer in or where to bring in a dollar amount on a counter offer process on something, and I see that there are comparable units in the building for sale, I'm definitely still going to try to contact the listing agents on those transactions and see if I can't get an idea, because that is going to, again, be a relevant sales comp. It's just that the buyer's agent or that listing agent has a lot less motivation to help me in that situation. Because I have nothing to offer them in return. But if you are clever and you can get them to like you, you will still get information that will be valuable to you. Also, this is important even in closed sales comps when I'm using a property sale as a sales comp, because there may be outliers. And what do I mean by outliers? Well, a property that, in my opinion, as a professional, I believe is a relevant sales comp. Yet this price is for some reason much higher or lower than the other sales comps, or than my interpretation of what all the other information I have available to me is telling me. There's usually a reason for this, and I need to find out what that reason is. Most of the time, I can find out myself by looking at agent private remarks, driving the neighborhood, looking at Google Maps, things like that, but sometimes I can't. Most of the time, there is usually an issue that came up in inspections, right? So if I'm pulling comps on something and everything in the neighborhood tells me, the price range is somewhere between 1.2 and 1.4, yet I have a very relevant sales comp and it came in at 1 or it came in at 2, I need to know why. Okay, so I call that listing agent. If I can't get information, this is a closed sale, so I can call the seller's or the buyer's agent as well. A lot of times it's because there was a major issue uncovered during inspections. And during inspection negotiation, there was a huge credit or a reduction in sales price or something that happened that affected the property value. Okay, so I need to find out why, and I need to convey this to my buyer and or seller because they need to see a complete picture. All they see is this home looks the same and it sold for way higher or way less than what I'm telling them the property that we're talking about is worth. Okay, so I need to know this stuff. I also like to handwrite the stuff, at least in the case of sellers. A lot of times I'm doing this presentation in person so they can see all the work that I did. You know, I need to tell them where I'm getting this information and why it's credible, right? I need 3 things to get business. What are those 3 things, guys? Trust. I need to be liked. I need to be trusted, right? They need to be competent.
Knowledge.
Only 3 things. They have to think I can do my job. I know what I'm talking about. They have to think that I'm going to do a good job for them. That's the trust. And they have to like me because they had to like me to even sit down with me, right? So I have to have those 3 things. You know, there are people that I think are competent and that I trust, but I don't like the way that they work. That's just a preference thing. So you just need 3 things to have an opportunity. And you have to support that information because even if you have those 3 things initially, they're very easy to gain or lose in the beginning and they become much harder to modify over time, right? So do everything you can to set yourself up for as much trust and competence vote as you can in the beginning. All right, so moving on to criteria that affects value, right? So there are 2 items that affect value, okay, and or 2 categories, I should say. There is internal or like direct appreciation, depreciation value, and this is in relation to the property that you're talking about itself. And there's external factors, so internal and external, or you know, subject property and anything external. So let's talk about what those are. So what affects property value? Well, the size of a property, bedroom, bathroom count, king is location, condition. External factors are, you know, things like view, things that are directly correlated to the property, its condition, its location, what the property has. External factors are things like, oh, there's a house under construction next door. Oh, it's close to that school or freeway. There's noise. Oh, it's a busy street. Oh, there's a multifamily here, or there's, you know, something commercial here. It's everything else, everything that is not the property itself that affects its value. What about something like a murder taking place in the home? Would that be external or would that be property related?
Property related.
I think that one's questionable. That's a trick question. I think it's a bit of both. I think it's a little bit of both.
Which one is the view? The
View?
exterior?
No, that would not be the external. That would be property related, right? That is always directly tied to the property, its location, its condition, the way it's built, the way the lot is situated. Yeah.
Gas station.
Okay. So there's 2 factors. So Do you think that you'd be able to account for external factors if you don't physically see the property and know, and look at the neighborhood?
No,
No. Do you always have the opportunity to get inside or walk the grounds of a property before you have to give an estimation of value?
yes.
No, you don't.
Why?
A lot of times I don't get into a property until I have a formal listing appointment, and sellers expect a number from me when I'm there. A lot of them try to get a number from me before I show up, and I'm like, no, I can give you a really rough range, but it's gonna be it could be very inaccurate, because until I actually see the property, I can't give that information to you. This is true. It also secures you the opportunity to have an actual listing appointment, which you really want. So how do I manage this expectation of giving property value without having to come back and having the opportunity to explain why to the sellers in person, which I think is really important to getting them to accept your information as valid, versus having to pull a CMA and give them an estimation of value after the fact in an indirect way, like email or text or phone call, which I don't think is as successful, because do sellers always have a reasonable grip of what their property's worth? Actually, very rarely do they. Very rarely do they, because it's their home and they love it and they think it's worth usually more, and sometimes significantly more than it actually is based on sales comps, which has no relevance, because does a buyer care? No. Does an appraiser care? No. Does a bank care? No. The bank only cares about factual information. And that factual information does include qualitative information like property condition and photos. All right, so how do I get around that? Well,
You're
first,
giving like a small range, like not the exact number, or you give them the exact number?
I generally give sellers a range. However, if I give them a range before I see the property, it's going to be a big range. And I don't like that, because it comes back to bite me. Because if I give someone a range
And then it's under there on the lower side.
of
you're
1,
gonna
2
go, but you
to
say
1,
up
6, what number do you think the seller is going to focus
1,
on?
6.
Yeah,
1, 6.
always. And then I have an uphill battle. Yeah. So what I do is I do have that range in mind for myself, and I don't put a dollar amount on my actual printed CMA in a listing appointment situation. Okay. And there's a couple of things I do, and you can learn more about this in the listing presentation class. I get to know the seller when I get there for that appointment. The very first thing I do is I have them take me around for a property tour and tell me about the property. It is during this time that I have to do 2 jobs. I have to very successfully connect, bond with that property owner. Okay, but I also have to get that range that I have, that pre-assessed range I have prior to seeing the actual physical condition of the property. I have to bring that down to a reasonable range, because 1.2 to 1.6, is that a reasonable range in that price range?
No,
It is not. But 1.2 to 1.3 in that price range, is that reasonable? Absolutely. Even 1.35 to 1.5, 150,000 at that. Like, I think a 10%, maybe a little bit more, and the higher price range you get, higher percentage range is pretty reasonable. Okay, I think 10% is pretty reasonable. Why? Yes. Why would 10% range be pretty reasonable? Any ideas?
Yeah, because it's not too wide, it's not like all over the place. But on the other hand, you don't say exact number, because it might be a little bit higher to a little bit less.
Yes, but there is a much more proven specific reason that that this range is reasonable, is because it is very, very well established, documented, and proven that if you list a property within 10% of its property value, you will get an offer. This is why when you make price reductions, doing anything less than 10% is fairly ineffectual. Because if a buyer thought a property that was listed at 1.1 was worth $1 million, they probably would have written that offer.
It'd be 10% above and 10%.
Yeah, 10% above or below. A 10% range is reasonable. And so if you think a property is worth 1 million and you have a 10% range, what numbers should you be recommending? 9050 to 1,050,000, right? That middle range. If you think it's worth $1 million, and you need a 10% range, you need to go on the low end and on the high end. So it should be 5% on each side.
Oh, 5%.
And guys, I mean, is there such a thing as underpricing a property?
No,
No,
everybody,
because
will-
what happens if it's underpriced?
everybody will want to buy it.
You get generally,
More offers.
yeah, if you do a good job of marketing it and you show it like you competently should, if it's under market value, it should receive multiple offers even in a weak market. Which generally means what, guys? Means better terms and pricing typically for the seller. It also means backup offers, which generally secure your actual buyers. Most buyers are, the seller has a lot of negotiation leverage, and most buyers are either going to cancel right away or they're going to perform when there's a backup buyer there. And most backup buyers are very happy to move forward, even with knowing some things about the property. You can share inspection reports and you can be like, okay, now that you know this, are you still willing to move forward at our accepted price and all of that, right? Maybe they are, maybe they aren't, maybe they say yes, but we'd like to have our own independent investigation. In any case, the seller has options. They have ammunition and they have security when they have backup offers. So there's twofold: better price and terms, but also leverage if they have backup offers. So underpricing typically results in a better outcome for the seller. Okay, you know, common argument with sellers is what? Well, let's try at the high end price and negotiate it down. Especially in a market like this one where interest rates are high and there are fewer buyers, buyers will not even look at property that's overpriced. So I never recommend overpricing. That makes zero sense. The more days on market there are, the less exposure there is. Buyers not only punish overpriced listings and sellers, but they don't look. Give me a second. My partner had a medical procedure, so
Oh.
just make sure he's okay. Yay, he's fine. All right, so. Yeah, don't chase the market down, bad idea. Don't chase that price down. And that 10% rule, guys, it's kind of a given, kind of a proven. All right, so. How far back should we be looking at sales history for comps? It probably depends on how many comps we have. In an ideal world, what time frame would I like my comps to be from that I'm using to recommend? a price?
60 days.
3 months?
3 to 6 months.
6 months.
Oh,
6
All
months. If you can get away with 3 months, more power to you, man, because this market is changing a lot, but it's very rare I find enough sales comps in 3 months or good enough sales comps in 3 months to go with that. I will go back a year if I need to. Okay, I will go back a year if I absolutely need to, but I might adjust pricing up or down depending upon the market conditions at that time versus the time that I am making my recommendations. Okay. Now, how many comps should you have?
5, 6.
I'm hearing 3, 5, 6.
At least.
5 to 7.
It does not matter as long as they are good and relevant. Even if I only have one, that's a real relevant sales comp. That is the only comp that I have that is really worth anything. Although I will probably pull some other comps as well separately and explain to the property owner or the buyer why I think these have some relevance, but they're not quite relevant enough. Okay. But if I have only one good sales comp, that's really the one I'm going to lean on. If I have 10, fantastic. I don't want more than 10 ever. No reason. I can get really picky with how recent those sales comps are then at that point. Let's talk about some other criteria. How about for a condo? Is there anything special about where I should be pulling comps from for a condo?
HOA.
The same building?
Yeah, I want the same building if at all possible, and I will go back even farther than a year if I absolutely have to. Get a sales comp in the building. Why? Why do you think that might be?
Because
Why?
rentals and sales, you know? Like how many rentals are in the building or,
Nah, I don't care about that.
okay, go
Richard,
back.
you're correct. It's because it's not just the unit that affects value, it's also the condition of the building and the amenities in the building. So if I have to go outside of the building to comp a unit, I have to comp buildings, which is very hard to do unless you personally have knowledge of both of those buildings and quite a bit of knowledge. Okay, can you do it if you have to without having personal knowledge? Yes, but you run a risk of not being accurate, right? Unless you know those buildings personally. Are the amenities the same? Are the services the same? What about two buildings where one that have exactly the same comparable conditions, units, whatever, but one's HOA dues are $1,200 a month and the other one is $500? Would that affect desirability as well?
Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely. And it affects a buyer's ability to borrow also. A lender, for some reason, qualifies the dollar amount of the HOA dues in some exponential way. So if this building has $500 a month HOA dues, let me just illustrate, and the buyer wants to buy $1 million condo and they're qualified for that, even if this one was $950 and had $1,200 a month HOA dues, the lender might not approve the loan on this one. And I'm not sure why. I just want you to know that that does happen and does exist. So if you have a buyer who's looking and is qualified up to a certain dollar amount, and you're looking at a building with really high HOA dues, do yourself a favor and check with their lender, their loan professional, to see if they'll still qualify for that dollar amount with super high HOA dues like that. Or preemptively in the beginning, have this discussion with the mortgage broker, with the buyer, and talk to them about, like, do we need to set a max for HOA dues so it doesn't affect your ability to borrow?
Kristen, the screen went black.
That's weird.
It says press start stop button to activate movie.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
that's-
don't see that.
That's been happening in a lot of the Zoom meetings, but we can still see like the Christen Tull
See,
account.
I can't.
I
Hmm.
think it has to do because they have a new camera in the office shooting us, and I think it goes to sleep after a little while. Let me grab Joshua Gully and see if we can fix this real quick.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Sorry, guys.
What was the name of this block?
Something. I think this might, maybe the
Yeah.
camera has a functionality that goes to sleep, but this is all everybody at home can see.
Yeah, it's the camera.
It must have a sleep timer on it. So just press the start stop button. Guys want a stock tip that's never done me wrong? Buy
Yes.
Starbucks stock right before November.
What is it?
Buy Starbucks stock right before November. Buy it at the end of October. It gets colder, people drink more coffee. They buy coffee out when they're shopping. When you don't know what the fuck to give someone for Christmas, you give them a Starbucks gift card and sell it
You mean before December?
before November. People start
But we are in
Starbucks stock.
November.
I know. Buy it
So
in
next
October.
year?
Yeah, I'm just telling you, for a lifetime, buy it in October,
Uh-huh.
sell it like Christmas Eve. Put a calendar reminder in there. I always make money with that, always. Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah. Wrote that down too.
How much would you suggest?
As much as you're comfortable with, man, but you know, like, I'm pretty financially conservative. I invest a lot less than.
So we missed the boat for this year?
Yeah, but it happens every single year. I
Yeah.
mean, what stock tip are you gonna get? That's
Now you can
that's
move it.
consistent annual. I've been doing it 8 years straight and I've always made money.
Like $10,000.
Depends.
Dude, I'm not gonna be responsible for your investments. You make that choice
No,
yourself.
I had 10,000 anyway, I was just curious, because even on the 9 property, Franklin,
I mean, I have 10 grand, but I don't ever invest 10 grand in anything unless it's real property, because I know that and I trust that, right? And it's real, it's secured. There's something called the secured investment. That means there's an actual physical possession you can sell, right?
Starbucks.
Unsecured debt, like a credit card, means there's no real value. Like if you default on that debt, unless it's a big purchase like a car or a boat, and even then it has depreciation, there's no secured recourse to foreclose or seize an asset in relation to a debt that's owed, right? So stock market, all of that unsecured type of investment and or debt is scarier, I think, to me than secured debt.
It's like a Ponzi scheme in my mind.
There's a reason it's called real estate, real property, is because it's fucking real, it's tangible, you can take it, you can sell it, you can use it. So that's where the term real property comes from, which is of course where real estate comes from. Yes.
I guess what you please explain about that area you're working with professionally, about that area you're always talking about in Brentwood or?
Yeah, I'll talk about that one. Sure. All right, so I want to talk about why, again, it's so important that we get to know the area that we're pumping property out in. Okay, it can be different from street to street or even across the street on the same street. There are major geographical barriers, and location is king in evaluation of property value, right? And that is driven by what? Why is location indicative of value so strongly correlated to value? Most of the time it is because of accessibility to transit, but most importantly in LA, where we have a shitty school system, it is schools and school ratings. If I don't have to pay to send my kids to private school so that my most important part of my life, usually my children, has a good opportunity at a good future, right? This is my entire investment. I am genetically designed to have investment value in my offspring, right? If I don't have to spend $1 million over the course of a few years to send my kids to school, I have more money to invest in property, and that property value is going to appreciate. So areas with good schools, good public school systems are always correlated to higher property value. Okay. Same thing with city services, right? If I live in Beverly Hills, I have great fire and police protection, right? If I live in the city of LA and there's a crime, do the police show up in the same amount of time as if in Beverly Hills?
No,
If they show up at all, right? So there's a reason for that. Okay, so
No homeless.
I'm not gonna touch the houseless.
Yeah.
I think houseless is the current term now. Those experiencing homelessness, I forget. I tend to, I'm not sure if you noticed, I tend to stay away from political and
Oh,
socio-economic hot.
it's not where they want to be. Yeah.
In any case, so you really need to be familiar. I'll give you two examples, both are in Brentwood, okay? So property north of Sunset and south of Sunset, I'm gonna give you three examples for Brentwood, all in directly the same area. They have extremely different property values. Why, guys? I use this example all the time, so if you take in class, you should know the answer to this.
It's my first.
It's the schools. The schools north of Sunset go to Kenter Canyon. They go to Pali High. So the entire public school system is highly rated north of Sunset.
highly rated.
Highly rated. There are some areas south of Sunset that go to Kenter Canyon Elementary, which is highly rated, but not Pali High. So the parents have to worry about school quality in probably arguably the most important years that affect college entrance, right? There are, however, a couple of very small areas, blocks south of Sunset that also go to Pali High. So never assume you know the parameters of school feeders. I thought I knew for years. I started my career in sales, the sales part of my career in Brentwood, where I worked with the Brentwood neighborhood specialist for a very long time, who's still active in that area. I didn't know this until a couple of years when I had a family that was looking in Brentwood for a purchase that needed their kids to go to Pali High. I found a little pocket south of Sunset that went to Pali High. So where can you get information about what school a property address goes to?
MLS.
No.
No? Title rep?
No. LAUSD, the school district information.
LAUSD.
Los Angeles, wait. Unified School District, right? You always want, it doesn't matter. You don't need to know the name of it. What you need to know is if you want to know what address goes to a certain school. And I have actually seen an instance where one property and the neighboring property feed to different schools because that dividing line is literally in the center of that block. Okay, is you need to look at the school district website. So that's all you need to know. You need to look at the school district website. Okay. Also, north of Sunset in Kenter Canyon, there is a huge divide between property values to the east and west side of the street. Any ideas why? Again, I use this example all the time.
Yeah, because of the land, it's a flat and.
Yeah, because on the east side of Kenter Canyon, the lots have very small flat areas. Most of them are directly above. On the west side of Kenter Canyon, there may be a couple of exceptions, but majority of the time, they are 10,000 square feet flat lots. Huge differentiation in property value. Why? Well, you can build on and use a flat lot. You may be able to on a hillside lot, but it's going to cost you a hell of a lot of money if you can even do it to prepare that land for development. It is directly related to how much square footage you can build, how much outdoor space you have, all of those things, right? And why would, a yard and pool and things like that in that area be so even more so than normal related to property value? Well, north of Sunset, we know it's because it has value. Why? Because people want to send their kids to the good public schools. So majority of the time, that's correlated to the type of buyer you're going to have, which is a family buyer, which really cares about a yard and pool and recreation for their children. Yes.
Yeah, I don't know, this might not be relevant, but I don't know, did you know 2 weeks ago today they captured a mountain lion?
But I'm not
They did,
surprised.
right at Bondi and San Vicente and Red Green.
I'm not surprised.
But is that something you could disclose to a client?
I mean, if a mountain lion was on the block or in the property and
Yeah, it's
say you were in a sale on the seller disclosures, yes, I think it would be something you need
That
to
was 2
disclose.
weeks ago.
There is a question directly related to wildlife
Yeah.
in the area
Two-
on seller disclosures.
two violent use.
It happens.
It happens. I mean, I don't think it's gonna affect value in any way.
Okay, they closed the school. they
Yeah,
locked
I don't think it's gonna
everything.
affect value in any way.
Okay, and they relocated the lion and all is well.
To dispose.
Yes, it's something you need to disclose if it directly affected the property that you have in escrow. What were you saying?
Oh, that they tranquilized the lion, relocated it and moved on.
Dude, I've been in showings in Truesdale and I come out and deers are drinking out of the water fountains and stuff. There's
Oh,
wildlife here, man. There's wildlife everywhere.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they affect mountain lions.
just
Yeah.
like that.
I have a 7-pound Pomeranian. When I was choosing my apartment, I was looking at something in Bel Air. I chose not to because I don't want any coyotes coming and smashing up my little 7-pound dog,
Aw.
right? It would destroy me. You would never see me again. I would be grief stricken in my bed for the rest of my life. You think I'm exaggerating? I am not.
You
that
can
dumb.
borrow my Siberian Husky if you want.
Oh, then I just hear my dog barking at your dog all day long because
Oh.
she's a Pomeranian. That's what she does.
Okay,
But I appreciate you.
sure.
Actually, maybe she'd be okay. For whatever reason, she is cool with dogs that look like her, even if they're bigger.
He looks like a wolf. Yeah.
Well, they're all Spitz breed.
Yep.
Yeah. Pomeranians and Huskies are more related than a Chihuahua and a Pomeranian.
Mm-hmm.
They were just bred for size. Okay, moving on. Let's talk about
You're talking about again.
Kenter Canyon. What? Kenter Canyon, yeah. So these are just a few examples. So you need to really do your research when you evaluate property. I can't go too much more into location, but like I'm just trying to open your eyes up to, some of the things that you really need to look at, right? Let's talk about a couple of things, other things real quick, and then we're gonna go to the MLS and I'm gonna show you like the mechanics of how I pull comps, okay? How about in a condo building, okay, a really tall high rise? Let's say all of the units are exactly the same. Do you think that a unit located on the 3rd floor, the 10th floor, and the 20th floor are gonna hold the same value? It's
No.
exactly
No.
the same unit on the
No.
third, it's
Higher
exactly-
is more view, it's more expensive.
Yeah, the higher, the better view, given that it has a better view and not affected by something else, is going to be worth more. What about, let's talk about Wilshire Corridor. What about something on the south side of a building versus the north side of a building, depending upon what side of Wilshire it's on?
Which
Well,
view,
the
the
south
view, the
side,
city,
you have
Yeah.
the view, the.
Yeah, are you on the Wilshire side where there's sound and traffic? You might still have a view, but you still have the view of the street and you have the noise. It is not gonna be worth as much as the unit on the opposite side of the building that just has the pretty south and north facing view. What about something on the west or east side of one of the same buildings? Now, one is gonna have ocean possibly, they're gonna have sunset, one's gonna have sunrise. Sunset and sunrise, which one's more valuable?
Sunset.
Yeah, why? People
you're
are
awake.
awake to see it. Yeah. All right, so, that's something. What about a view property? Well, let's say you have exactly the same property right next door to each other, but one has an unobstructed view of the canyons or a partial view or the city or the ocean or whatever versus one that has a peekaboo or none. Gonna be massively different property values, right? This is what I call an intangible. So I don't call it an intangible when you have something with a view versus something not a view, right? But when you have exactly the same property or properties with different views, but they both have views, it's really hard to quantify how much a view is worth, and beauty is in the eye of the beholder, right? So this is the part that really gets into art. What about, I'm gonna throw my dad under the bus here. So I'm adopted, we all know this. I love my daddy. He's been an agent literally since the day I was born. I knew him through my family before I was adopted. So he's been an agent for just shy of 40 years. My dad, however, was an engineer before. He is really good with concept. He is really good with how things work. He's not so great at assessing beauty or value because his mind doesn't work like a lot of ours. An engineer mind is a special breed. Not saying they all are like that. My dad can barely match socks if he remembers to have 2 on versus 1. Okay, so, I had a client who was looking in the area that he works in. There was a listing on the street that he lives on. And my dad, even though he's an agent, severely overpriced this property. And I told him that at the beginning. Why? Well, he fell into the old seller trap of my street is the best fucking street because my house is the best fucking house, even though he's a real estate professional, right? That was number 1. But number 2, he said the house was completely updated. When 5 years ago, with the cheapest Home Depot shit that you can find, that does not mean that the house is worth what someone who did the same, updated a home with high-end materials with better taste, that better matched market trends at the time, who did a better job with installation. Those things are visible. We might not always know exactly why, but those are the perception things that you as an agent need to get really good at. Otherwise, you'll end up in a situation where you're not able to properly assess value like my dad wasn't in this instance. Okay, he eventually lost that listing after a couple of minor price reductions. And I said to him, Dad, the house is not worth that. I told you it was worth, I think he listed it at 3. I'm like, it's worth 2.3 all day and nothing more. Nothing more. I think he got it down to 2.6 and then the seller took the listing away from him. But the only mistake was he's not good. It's not his natural talent assessing finish quality. That was his only mistake. My dad does really well and specializes in income property, which is heavily dependent upon what factor for value.
Cap rates,
Rents.
rent.
Doesn't matter what a property looks like if it's income property, other than its income, right? And its potential for income. Current income and future potential for income. That's a whole different beast. All right, so now that we've talked about that, I want to show you a little bit of the mechanics of how I actually physically pull comps on the MLS. Sound good? Yes. All right. Those of you at home, hold on while I get the MLS up and then I'll share my screen. Oh, by the way, last week I did not have screen share on the entire time. One of my friends texted me, but I don't monitor my phone usually for text messaging on the Zoom platform when I'm teaching, because I do this share screen and I have to hold my attention between classroom and share screen. So if anything like that ever happens, just like you did with that black screen we got during today's class, please let me know. I don't want to shortchange you. All right. The MLS gets kind of weird with screen share as well. So if I'm transitioning from screen to screen, it might not transition for you guys at home. Please let me know. All right, can everyone at home see the main home screen for MLS?
Yes, we
Yes.
can.
Okay, fantastic. So when I want to pull comps, I'm going to go into the search section and I'm going to choose what type of listing I'm looking at. Am I comping out a lease, vacant land? Although don't try to comp out vacant land. That's an impossible task for an agent unless you are extremely skilled in development regulation in LA. Income property, again, more complicated because it has to do with rents and things like that, and also listings that are going to be on LoopNet and not the MLS. As residential income is oftentimes sold by a residential agent, but just as often by a commercial agent. Condo, if it is a condo. What other types of property qualify as condo? Planned unit development.
What is it?
Planned unit development. So this means something like, they could all be freestanding houses, but maybe they're in a gated community. Usually it looks like tract development. We don't have a whole lot of that out here in LA, but in surrounding areas we do, larger development complexes. No, I heard the word apartment. So guys, this is I think a really important real estate lesson. People from the East Coast call units apartments all the time. So there's a vastly different criteria here to be considered a condo versus a unit. And that criteria is, can that unit be sold separately? If it cannot, it is an apartment building, all of the property must be sold together, which we can only sell the building or lease a unit as a real estate agent. Whereas a condo, you have to sell units individually. So that's different. So when someone from New York tells you they want to buy an apartment,
Yep.
you know that you're going to leave them alone because that's the terminology they know and use, but you know that it's not an apartment, it's a condo or a unit. I mean, that terminology is just the same. How about townhouse, guys? This is particularly important. In other states, lenders have different requirements and lending abilities for a property that's considered a townhouse. In the state of California, it is not a legal designation to a property. Lenders often operate in multiple states, including mortgage brokers, even if they're located here. Do not use the term townhouse. It will confuse a lender and can sometimes really mess you up, including a deal being dead. Okay, what we have is townhouse style condos. Okay, there is no legal designation of townhouse in the state of California. Can you use the term townhouse? Absolutely, because it's a style. Just like I'd say Cape Cod or Mediterranean, it's a style. All right, so search, I'm going to choose the type of listing and I'm going to use a single family. I'm going to use the same example I always use because it has such clear defining parameters as far as its location. What is the address? Okay, so the very first thing that I do is I come up here to this bar. The reason for that is it will, just like Google Maps, hone in on an address. So here I'm going to put my subject property address, which is the property we're trying to evaluate for value. So the address I'm going to use is 2703, if I remember it correctly, Greenfield Avenue in LA. All right, so we get this orange dot here. And those of you at home see the map.
Yes.
Okay, great. I'm going to zoom in on it pretty hard. I want to see it because, Dave, I'm not familiar with this area, but I need to be aware of all the geographic parameters around. So this subject property is located here. What's unique about its location is that it's very, very close to the 10 freeway. How close? Well, it's like half a block, because this block is not a full-size block, right? It's like half a block. So would that have an effect on property value?
Yes.
Absolutely. So I need to make sure I'm not pulling comps that don't have that same feature. Because if I can't find any comps that are that close to the freeway, then I'm gonna be forced to look further away, and then I have to account for a price reduction that's intangible. It's very hard to tell how much less would a buyer feel a property is worth because it's this close to the freeway versus the comp I'm using that's farther away. I want to avoid those intangible factors as much as possible if I'm able. If I'm not able, I'm not. But if I can, I'm going to. Right? So there's a tool up here called Draw. I like the one shaped like a house here. It's called Polygon. And I'm going to literally draft the physical parameters of what properties I'm going to say are relevant to my subject property. So not only is this property bordered by the 10, it's bordered by the 405, but Sepulveda is a pretty big street, so I'm probably going to use Sepulveda as a geographic boundary. What about this here? What's the Exposition Boulevard relevance?
The
What is the
train.
symbol? Yeah, there's this train, the Expo line. So I don't want to go around this. And then we have Westwood Boulevard, which is also a pretty strong, busy, like geographical parameter, right? Because it's a busy street. Okay, so I'm going to look at property, you know, here. Oops. See, I made a mistake. I didn't want to go on the other side of Sepulveda. Once you finish the polygon shape, you can modify it. You can literally drag that corner and pull it over here. That's why I like this tool, because as I get results over here, I can go in and move my lines without having to redo my search. Okay, what's the other thing I need to do? Well, we know only
Date.
sold properties are relevant. So I'm going to click the box for sold, and then yes, the date. I'm going to define what period. So I can start with 3 months or 6 months. I'm just going to say 6 because I am working with right now a really small geographical boundary. And so I'm probably going to have to give up certain criterias, like how long it's been since the property sale went. I can already tell you right now that I'm not loving that I have 2, but sometimes I'll stop myself in the middle of entering other criteria like bedroom, bathroom count, property square footage range, which I think are going to be very relevant to property value. And I'll just look at these like, oh, is this a completely redone house? Because my house is remodeled, but it's not completely redone. And this is remodeled, but it's not completely redone. So I'm already thinking like, oh, wow, as long as my square footage, bedroom, bathroom count is similar, this is probably a relevant comp. So maybe I don't need to go ahead and go back a year. Why do I prefer this? Why am I doing this versus just going back a year?
It's more relevant
Yeah, and why is the time frame so relevant right now?
because the market's changing. all
The
time.
market is changing very drastically right now. 5 years ago, I probably wouldn't have minded so much going back 12 years. I probably wouldn't have stopped. I would have just gone, or not 12 years, 12 months. I would have just popped in that 12 months. But because market conditions are changing so rapidly, I have to exercise my good judgment and say the period of time in which a property is sold is probably a little bit more important right now than it typically is, because those conditions are so drastically changing. Okay, so I saw that one. I'm going to look at the other one, 1.3. These are very different price ranges, right? I'll look at the condition real quick, just the photos. This is before I do more in-depth research. Well, it's on Veterans. Veterans a little bit busier of a street, yeah? Also, it's significantly smaller. But you know what? Both of these properties, I'm going to say the condition, like we're just doing hypotheticals right now, right? You need to know the condition of your subject property, which do you always know?
No, until you.
No. Do your research, like super sleuth. See if there was an old listing or something. Ask the seller to confirm property specs with you, but also ask them if they can maybe send you a couple homes, pictures of their home, so that you can better provide an analysis of value. Okay, so let's just say it's a perfect world and these comps are both fantastic. One is on the smaller size, one is on the bigger size. Let's say my property is closer to the bigger size. That means I'm probably closer to this 1.7 number, right? So I'm making all of these judgments and making notes down and modifying it as I go. Okay, let's say I've decided this, but now I'm gonna look at these listings. I've decided these are both relevant comps to me. Okay, so even though one is significantly larger than the other, they're similar condition. And for me, the time frame right now and the geographical boundaries of where I'm pulling comps are so important to me because of the proximity of this property and to the freeway and how it is so affected by this location issue. That I would rather use these two properties, even though they're drastically different in size, because those other criteria are so relevant. And so with the property that's similar in size, I'm gonna say, you know, it can probably be around this dollar amount after I've researched everything about this listing and made sure that there's no outlying external conditions I don't know about by reading private remarks, by doing all of that. And I'm probably, and this is also an alternate method for when you can't find properties with like similar specs, but you can find properties with similar conditions. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use both of these and combine this right now in the CMA that I'm creating. So I'm saying that this is probably pretty indicative of my subject property value entirely because of pricing, location, and because the specs are similar, but everything except for specs are similar on this property. And this is my only other relevant comp period. What I'm gonna look at, it's so much smaller. Let's say it's 900 square feet smaller. I'm gonna use a method that is much less accurate, but is still relevant and is an alternate method when you have no real comp with similar specs and condition. All you have is similar condition. I'm going to look at the sold price per square foot. Okay, so what is my sold price per square foot?
1,190.
1,190.
By the way, always look at agent full detail when you're making your assessments. Yes, it's 1,190 and 27 cents. So I'm gonna take my subject property that I'm trying to comp out. I'm gonna say, let's just say it's 2,000 square feet to make it an even number. And I'm going to multiply 2,000 times 1,190. I come up with a price of 2,380. Do you see how this is not very accurate?
Yes,
Why is that?
I like it.
Well, because when you have a single family home with a certain bedroom count in a certain area and the lot size is the same, one has more square footage, but one doesn't. I mean, will I pay 2.38 in that neighborhood?
No.
No, a buyer typically won't, right? So it does cap out at a certain point. So smaller homes typically that are single family typically have a slightly higher value than sales price per square foot would indicate because it's like an entry level into that neighborhood. Whereas a larger home that has more square footage still has a cap because I'm not moving this property to Beverly Hills. I'm still not getting away from the freeway, but I am adding value by adding square footage. So this method has value, but I need you to still exercise your common sense when you're looking at this. Now, if this number had come out to 1.9, right? This could have been a little bit more relevant comp for me, but because it skews the value so much into a price range that I know doesn't exist in this neighborhood, is this now that I've done more research a valid comp for me? No. So really my only valid comp
Is the other.
is the other. Yeah. So art, not science. And I know when you're new, this is so hard because you don't know the neighborhoods. How could I have found out that 2.38 is not a reasonable sales price for this neighborhood?
See if there is anything else in
Yeah.
this range or just drive. this
I'm
straight
just gonna
into
look at
one.
all the sales that have happened here in the last year, pretty much. So I can remove criteria.
Oh,
And instead I can say, you know, maybe 1 year. I can be really rough with this. I can hit apply. I can view listings. And I can come over here and I can press this button and it will take me from highest to lowest, right?
wow,
Now look,
look at that.
What?
I said, look at that, sold price, list price, when the market
Yeah.
was better. Wow.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So let's see. So I have one that's in that general area, right? But let's look right away. I've got almost 4,000 square feet, and I can tell you from the photo, it's brand new construction or complete remodel, right? Right, is this indicative of the other homes, a single level, the standard size ceilings? No, this is an outlier comp. It's not relevant. So I know that, look, our highest sales prices very consistently are in the 1.7 to 1.8 range, right? I can tell that by looking at this, by exercising common sense. So when I get a number like I just got from using the sales price per square foot method, I know that I need to take that out. That's not going to help me. But will the sellers, if I'm going for a listing appointment, possibly still mention the sale? Yes. So should I still have knowledge of this MLS listing? Should I still have written my notes down as to why it's not a relevant comp, so that if they bring it up, I can share it with them 100%. It's just not going in my CMA. Make sense? Okay.
Yes.
All right, guys. So that's it for today. CMA can get a lot more complicated than this. I have had instances where I cannot find a comp to save my life. I've only had that happen twice, but it does happen. Okay, so when you're pulling a CMA, recommendations for pricing are going to be some of the most important functions you ever perform in your career, not only for your success, but also for your client's success, which is directly correlated to your future success and future business in referrals and repeat business, right? So until you're super familiar with the property and a neighborhood and feel really confident doing this, you want to do this with your mentor. You want to, sometimes I pull a CMA 3 different times on 3 different days when I'm in different moods. I mean, I don't usually have the luxury of that much time. But if you have to do this much research just for a CMA portion of something you're going to present, do you think that if someone called me right now and asked me to do a listing presentation tomorrow morning in an area I wasn't familiar with, that I would do the best job? So what would I need to do if I can do it without hurting my chances for having the appointment at all? I need to buy myself some time. Seller, I'd love to do that. I'm very sorry, however, I'm booked with appointments. Are you available this day and this time? Right? And I put it a while off because if I need help from other people I need to depend on, I need to account for the possibility that their schedule conflicts with my availability, right? And I don't think any seller is going to have an issue with thinking that I have appointments and I'm an active agent and a professional that doesn't have next day availability. Now, if they tell me we're going to go out of town for 3 weeks and I have to have this happen tomorrow, I'll say, you know what? Let me give you a call back. Let me see if I can move something around. And then I'm going to scramble and see if the people I need to help me are available to help me right now. And then I have to make a decision. If they're not, am I shooting myself in the foot? Or is this really my only opportunity? I'm going to go in there fairly unprepared. Maybe it works out, maybe it doesn't. You are your business owner. You need to exercise your own judgment and discretion, but do not set yourself up for failure off the bat. Do not accept a next day appointment that you're not going to be prepared for without checking or without, giving yourself the opportunity to buy more time. Okay.
Hey, Kristen, can I ask you one quick question? Just out of curiosity. Oh, never mind.
Oh, go ahead, ask me.
No, it was on the MLS. So
I still have it up, honey.
Oh, mine went away. Wait,
I'm
it's
bringing it
coming.
back.
Okay, thank you. So the first house, just out of curiosity, the square footage, the price on the square footage was $810.54 and it sold at 3.1 million. The second house, probably close by, square footage price was more and sold for less. Why?
Yes. What did I show you in that illustration of where I tried to pull that smaller house with the sales price per square foot? That smaller homes have higher value because they still have the outdoor space. That's just how it works with single family, right?
Okay,
Someone might pay 1.5, 1.6 to get in a single family neighborhood with a yard.
right. Okay.
Whereas nobody, not nobody, but there are fewer people who are going to pay 3 million to live in that same neighborhood by the freeway. Does that make sense?
No.
There's an external economic depreciating factor involved. So if I can afford a $3 million home, I very likely do not want to purchase one within half a block of the freeway.
right?
I'm likely gonna buy a less grand house in a neighborhood that I like better, that's not as close to the freeway.
Okay,
Why is that? Why would I not want to live by a freeway?
it's noisy, traffic,
What else?
Pollution.
yeah,
100%. Did you know
fog,
that schools, daycares and all of that are not allowed to be built legally within a certain distance from the freeway now? If they're pre-established, I think they're okay, but there's a reason for that.
okay,
Distance to the freeway is directly related to environmental pollutants that are proven to affect early childhood development.
wow.
What is an ideal,
Don't send your kids to the daycare right next to the freeway. Yes.
Yeah,
ideal location from the freeway? Miles?
I don't know what ideal location is, but the EPA has a map that has different color codes on it. I think it's 500 feet is red. And that is the distance in which the government is not, it does not allow schools, daycares, things like that anymore. I think they did at some point. In fact, the city zoning and planning used to prefer locations near these undesirable locations because they were cheaper and easier to develop, because they were not as valuable, because property owner or people buying property were not as interested in these areas. Yeah, Rhonda? I'm done. Yeah, any more questions, guys?
no, thank you very much.
You are welcome. Practice, 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 okay?
Yes,
QA is not easy. I don't care how long you've been doing this.
No.
So this is something you need to practice, and you put time and energy and effort and no stone unturned into. Always. Not as easy for a buyer sale. Why? Because you need comps kind of in a hurry. But,
Mhm.
you know, there's a lot of people in this office you can get help from. So if you can find someone very familiar with the area or even the building, you know, that's going to be helpful when you need time saving things. Okay. All right. Good luck. Go practice. You're welcome.
thank you.
Mhm.